the idea that there's this sort of like smoky backroom cabal of like label bigwigs or marketing people like secretly pulling the strings, and they're the reason why that band you like put out a bad album. It's like, no, the band made a bad album because they made a bad album. Like, have you ever tried getting a musician to do something they don't want to do? Have you ever tried?
Make a good point.
I respect people who have sort of the artist mindset about these things, because those are the people who take chances that I would never take, because that's not how I think about the world. You know what I mean? But we need people who will take chances and do stuff that may or may not be successful. If all we did was just continue to do things that we know will be successful, then we wouldn't have any innovation in the world. If you're the type of person that has like strong feelings about music, keep asking yourself why until you get down to the very first principles, which ultimately is going to be subjective. You're going to say, I value the following. And if you get down to that, the great part is that you might actually find yourself being a little bit uncomfortable with what you find there at the bottom of that pit. And my point here is not that I want to like invalidate anybody's opinions or anything like that. Like, in fact, it's the opposite. Like what hopefully happens is that you realize.
My guest today is a veteran of the rock music focused YouTube content world, and they've added a wealth of discussion to various scenes within that world, at times navigating the tightrope walk that can be the hot takes of the latest trends in music, but also essentially doing journalism by researching the history of bands or subgenres and finding out how they started, who were the main players in those scenes, and perhaps as well at times what happened when they kind of fall out of favor. And what I particularly value is how much their commentary is backed by fairness and basis of fact, so that even in moments when I might disagree on matters of taste, for example, it's always in a way that I can totally respect and understand. And that's something that I really appreciate, and I think is lacking in some areas of our musical discourse these days. So I am delighted and honored to have Finn McKenty joining me today for a chat. Thank you very much. To begin, I suppose, I'd love to get just a sense of an initial backstory. You're very good at conveying what's happening in music and things you appreciate in a very kind of factual and interesting way. What was your first spark as a kid, perhaps, or a teenager, when you first realized music was something a little bit extra and a little bit different that connected with you more than maybe perhaps other aspects of life?
I saw Suicidal Tendencies on MTV in 1990, I think. They had been banned from playing in LA for like 5 years because of gang violence and stuff at their shows. And I saw something on MTV News about how they had played their first show there in like 5 years. And I didn't really know what was going on, or I didn't understand it because I was like 12 or 13 or something at the time. But I thought it was cool, and I went out and bought the album, and ever since then, I just sort of, spent the next many years, going down the, rabbit hole of all this kind of music, and that's sort of what I focused on for the rest of the decade.
Oh my God, that's a hell of an introduction. Suicidal Tendencies is not a gentle gateway, I would think, into the world of like alternative music. I mean, I've adored the album Freedom by them, which I think is absolutely sensational. But like, as a young kid, was it not in some way kind of overly jarring? I think I needed more of like an Offspring with Pretty Fly. I'm like, oh, no. I can this kind of rocky. And then I was eventually into Smash and the rest.
No, I mean, half my family are like drug addicts and criminals that have been in prison. My dad was a corrections officer. He used to be a junkie. He would tell me about shooting up in the neck when I was like 9 years old. And, my family members have been murdered by other family members and blah, blah, blah. So none of that was.
All right. That really was the least of the troubles of
it didn't faze me.
Okay. Jeez, fair enough. I've heard people say that the kind of music you get into when you're like around the age of 13 or so can be so formative because of everything that goes on in life and changes there, that becomes your sort of cornerstone that you build upon.
Yeah, definitely true for a lot of people. Certainly not for me, but for a lot of people it is.
Right. So what was it for you, or has it just been a continuous exploration beyond Suicidal Tendencies from there?
What? Like the things I'm interested in, or music specifically, or?
Is there a particular area of music or genre that you always enjoy and always go back to, no matter how diverse your taste might go over time?
No, most of the stuff that I used to like when I was a kid sounds terrible to me now. It's like unlistenable and bad to me for the most part. But that's true of like every era, every genre of music. At least 90% of anything in any, like, it's just, there's some science fiction author who said like 95% of everything is crap. And it's true of literally anything, whether you're talking about, you know, SaaS companies or, you know, a musical genre or movies or like anything, like most of it is trash, you know, and there's a lot of stuff that I liked when I was 16 years old or something that listening to it now as an adult, I'm like, this is horrible. One thing I think is a really good filter. My wife is quite a bit younger than me, but she grew up listening, like her favorite band is Avenged Sevenfold and stuff. So, you know, she knows about this kind of music, but she's a very good filter. Sometimes, you know, I'll put some, I mean, I've been with her for 11 years, so it doesn't really happen anymore, but it used to happen a lot that I would put something on that I liked when I was, you know, younger, and she'd be like, this is bad. and instantly I'd be like, fuck, you're right. This is not good.
Yes. I get some versions of that where, like, if you haven't got into a certain band at a certain point in time, you kind of never can. One of the examples I go to is Incubus. So if you play someone Incubus, like the Science, like early records now, you'd be like, this sounds like ass. And my wife was much too late for Incubus. So I put that on. She's like, can we switch this up? I'm still going, no, this is great because it's like edgy and cool. But then you do see it objectively and you go like, yeah, it's muddy as fuck. I can't really hear anything that's going on. Yeah. But then I still have enough nostalgia within me that I could still enjoy it, even though it's trash, but maybe just on my own in the car. Do you have that with your kind of older fan like music? No, you just
I don't have. Nostalgia is not a part of my personality. It just doesn't. I'm immune to it personally, but I understand for a lot of people it's a big thing.
Well, I wonder then, that must make it be a bit of a superpower when it comes to what you're very good at, or at least you've done a lot of, is looking at musical trends that come and go, because you can detach, I suppose, from how it might be still seen as good from nostalgia reasons. You go, well, if you look at it objectively, then this is kind of how it is.
Yeah, I have no interest in most of the music I talk about, so that makes it actually a lot easier for me to just sort of present the facts, because I have no opinion on it myself.
Okay, interesting. So,
like, I've never listened to like System of a Down or anything. Like, I never cared about them at all. So I didn't hear them until much later, like when I was probably in my 30s or something. I was like, this is not good. But I know people like them, so, but I have no emotional attachment. So if you want me to make a video about System of a Down, then I'll do it.
Right. So yeah, I saw a couple of your recent videos when you were kind of having a look at the feedback on, you know, focusing on similar kind of millennial or new metal bands, etc. And you're kind of, that's what the audience is asking for. So that's what you will do for as long as you can. What is there a point that you could look back and see when the indication was that that's a good rabbit hole to go down to with your content? You went, okay, I'll go more and more into that. Yeah. Or did it pivot generally from the music you were interested in and then cross gradually over?
No, I've never really talked very much about music that I like. It's always been really for the audience. The first big video I had was about Bring Me the Horizon. So like pretty much from the beginning, it was like a millennial nostalgia thing. And I've never really, I like them. I like what they do now, but I didn't really like any of the stuff before that. So that was just a video that I made for the audience.
Okay. Interesting. Because I guess that's probably why as well, when you say things that are maybe opinions against a particular band or genre, there's a fairness to it, because you are looking at it as a sort of objective, like journalistic view outside.
Probably half the shit I make videos about, I've never listened to before.
Wow. Interesting.
I mean, like, I know, like, I know about all of it, but like, I've never actually, like, I don't know, for example, like Breaking Benjamin, like I know about them, but like I've never listened to a Breaking Benjamin album in my life, you know. Nothing. Sure. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. It's just like that's not something that I ever was like, oh, I'm gonna go listen to Breaking Benjamin today, you know.
I've some bands like that, like Hawthorne Heights. I'm aware of because they were like apparently the poster boy for like emo. I listened to a bunch of emo, but never listened to them, and I don't really know what they're like, but I just assume some of the things.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I think I would struggle to make a video about it with because your videos do contain some commentary on the musical sound and things that we're going to here and there. Was that purely from like you'll do a bit of listening here and there to get some context around it as well?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not like I'm writing these without listening to it at all. I'm just saying prior to making a video about it, I hadn't listened to it.
That's utterly fascinating to me. And I'm starting to help me understand perhaps how you can be so what I would see as apparently very fair and objective,
I'm
which
just totally detached. I have no
that's great.
attachment, or like I have no opinion or interest. Like I don't
Yeah.
care at all about a lot of it. So that makes it easy.
What I'd love is for people that do have strong opinions and connecting with them in terms of their identity and the rest, which is obviously going a step too far for the most part, could also be objective in discourse and have like civil conversations about it. And that's something I'm trying to champion myself, because I do feel strongly about a lot of the music that I cover and into. But at the same time, like I think one of the things I've enjoyed from yours is like, well, I might not be into this, but I totally understand why people are based on their interest in the rest. And I feel that way about, well, in theory, the opposite, right? I, for example, love, and people that watch my channel will now roll their eyes because I mention this every single time, but Sleep Token. Really love Sleep Token. They're a fantastic band. But I could also totally understand why people wouldn't. And I wouldn't be like railing against them. Like, well, you have to understand how good it is. Like my wife fucking hates Sleep Token. Just can't get on board with the vocals.
As a part of, like, I don't have really a part of my personality where like I need people to like hear my opinions or agree with them or anything like that. Certainly not about something like media consumption. Like this is not something that's important to me. Like when it comes to like, I'm interested in having conversations about objective things, like, you know, so like my career has been in product design and marketing. And at the end of the day it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what I think. It only matters what users think and what drives revenue. Right.
Yes.
So we might all think that this feature of our app is like, well, there's lots of times where you make a product and users use it in a way that you never would have guessed and you would have never imagined. And it seems totally crazy to you that they use it that way, but you're like, well, I guess, but that's what people do. So, you know, it's our job to understand what product people want us to make and then make it for them so that they'll give us money. Like that's the way your brain has to work as a designer and a marketer, that your opinion doesn't really matter, you know?
Yes.
That you have a job to do, which is to make a thing that people find so valuable that they will give you money in exchange for it.
Yeah. I can absolutely see how that relates to the kind of the music or
so
or
like
any
the
other
idea of like standing
big
up in a meeting and being like, I don't like this color. You'd be like, cool, Steve. Are you okay?
Because
like,
the marketing research says that everyone else does. And
right. So duly noted, please sit down and let us finish the meeting.
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's good insight, I think, something to be mindful of in things beyond and in anything that, you know, music and the rest. Like, for example, there might be bands that I don't like at all. I'm not into Avenged Sevenfold, for example, but I suspect because they're headlining Download Festival, I'm okay with being wrong about that. Like, I'm clearly
it's not wrong. It's just like, it's just an opinion. I mean, you can like or not, you know, you're not wrong about it. It's just your taste, you know?
Yes, wrong is the incorrect use of the word. It's more that like I am in the minority of that, perhaps. And,
all right, fine. I mean, I don't like Drake's music, but obviously there's hundreds of millions of people who do.
Yeah.
It's just my opinion.
That seems healthy to me. I'd love for more of that. I mean, one of the things I saw your video on rockism, and so much of that. I mean, here's the thing: so much of what you say makes so much sense, and I think that's why some people would give like negative comments, because they don't like to stare at the truth, perhaps of what makes sense. And like, I predominantly love and enjoy rock music. I enjoy all kinds of music beyond that, but that is my main beating heart of love.
Yeah.
But equally, I'm aboard with all the things you're saying about it. It doesn't have to be the raw rock band. It doesn't have to be guitars and bass and drums and vocals and that's it. Experiment, do other bits and pieces. I also I don't agree with this idea that if you like rock music, you shouldn't fucking like anything else. Like the idea that there's anything called like a guilty pleasure blows my mind. Like I will equally...
my mind, well, I mean, the root of all of this is that my brain works very differently than my audience's brains do for them. I mean, my brain works differently than the vast majority of people on this planet to begin with. But certainly, you know, with sort of the type of people who care a lot about rock music on the internet, my brain is very, very, very different from theirs. And, you know, that's okay. At the end of the day, they're the boss and it's my job is to make the thing that they want.
Sure. I've heard you say that in a few of your videos, and I'm so interested in, I mean, if you're happy to chat about it, to unpack that a little bit more. and understand that, because I mean, I'm also a content creator, and I don't see that the same way. I get it from a standpoint of, like, if you want to maximize the impact of your channel with the views, etc., then sure, absolutely. And YouTube,
which is my objective. Yeah.
Right. Yes. And YouTube's very clear about wanting to funnel things in that direction, serve the thing that they know exactly who the audience for that is. So you can send them to that. But I think, and maybe it's because in the content that I'm focused on, I'm also a fan of a lot of it as well, that I'm okay with doing a video about, say, an unknown band that I love, and it tanking, but I'll know it'll tank 100%, and it will definitely tank. But I'm okay with that because I enjoyed that, and I enjoy the discourse and the commentary and whatever that has. But I suppose if the content you're making isn't something you're spending time listening to as well, do you think that's the difference maker as to how you can be objective about, I will do what this audience wants?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I think it's awesome. Like, I totally respect people who sort of have more of like an artist mindset about these things, like you're describing. Is, you know, to me, the difference between like art and design is that art is for you, design is for them. And having spent my career, you know, in product design and marketing, like it's impossible for my brain to work any other way. You know what I mean? So, but I respect people who have sort of the artist mindset about these things, because, you know, those are the people who take chances that I would never take, because, you know, that I would just never take, because that's not how I think about the world. You know what I mean? But we need people who will take chances and do stuff that may or may not be successful. Because if all we did was just continue to do things that we know will be successful, then we wouldn't have any innovation in the world. So we need both types of people. I'm very good at understanding what works and doing more of it, you know, but we need other people who, you know, are willing to sort of blaze new trails creatively, which is not really my thing. But I think we need both.
Sure. And certainly the ones on the more art focused side of things, as you put it, could benefit from understanding and learning more from other sides, the things that you do. Like, you've built an incredible platform based on how you have had the right focus and taking the signposting from your audience and you know, building videos that they're after.
Well, but you can't fight who you are. You know what I mean? Like, if you're the type of person that makes stuff because it wants to scratch a creative itch inside you, you're not going to be happy trying to do things the way that I do, you know, of just like running a content factory. That's going to be frustrating to you. You're not going to be happy, you know. Now there's a sort of larger conversation. You could imagine that inside every person there's a slider, and that slider, like in an RPG, like in the character selector screen, right? On one side is idealism and the other side is realism. Meaning that, you know, an idealist believes that the world should be different than it is and strives to change the way that, you know, strives to change things. The realist just accepts things the way they are and sort of adapts to that. My slider would be very far on the realism side of things. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's just where mine is. I would say most people who do creative things, their slider is a little bit far on the idealism side of things. And again, I think that's totally valid and important for all the reasons I just said. However, I think a lot of those people end up a little bit frustrated in life because, you know, they want the world to be different than it is. And I totally salute anybody that wants to take that challenge on. But there's going to be times where you may be trying to push a rock that's a little bit too big for you to move. That's for everybody to sort of, you know, deal with on their own. But there are a lot of people who are, you know, very frustrated with where they're at in terms of, you know, trying to get attention for their art or make money from it or something like that. And, you know, to me, fundamentally, I just look at most things in life as a constrained optimization problem. And so if you don't change the inputs to a system, the outputs of that system are unlikely to change as well. So, you know, if you're saying, I want to make this kind of art, but I'm getting the following results, but I refuse to change anything about what I'm doing. Well, there's no reason to think that, that the future would be any different than the present, right? Unless perhaps perhaps you just need to keep doing more of this, and eventually, you'll slowly push that rock up the hill. That can happen too. But I think more often than not, it's like, for example, how many people, would like to get more attention for what they're doing, but, musicians would like to get more attention for what they're doing, but they don't want to make TikToks. Well, you don't have to do anything. It's possible that, you can somehow make things work without doing TikToks, but it's like, you want a large audience and attention for what you do, and yet you're unwilling to do the things that, typically are the ways people get attention for what you do. So it's like, I don't know what to tell you, right? It's like, like anything else in life, you just sort of, in my view, but again, my slider is very heavily on the realism side of things. So I would just be like, how does this system work? Okay, my brain is extremely good at understanding systems. So I would say, how does this system work, and how do I navigate it to get what I want out of this system? Other people would say, no, the system is fucked. We need to change it. And that's cool too. Sometimes they're successful, but I think and there's times where I think I need to take more chances also. So I'm not saying that like my way of thinking is perfect. We all, our strengths are our weaknesses in almost every situation, right? Like, for example, I'm extremely consistent. I've eaten the same thing for breakfast for fucking probably 6 years. Right. And I never change it. I eat the same thing like 3 times a day and I don't change it. And that's just sort of the way my brain works, probably because I'm autistic. But that's the way I am. And there's times where, I sort of need a little bit of a nudge to try something different. And when I try something different, I'm like, oh, well, I should have changed this a long time ago. Right. So I want to be careful that nobody listens to this, and I'm not suggesting that the way that I think or operate is right for everybody, because it's not. So I don't know, it's kind of a tangent, but I don't know if any of that is useful.
It does. It makes sense. Yeah. Because if we're on different ends to a degree on that spectrum you're talking about, there are definitely things, as I was saying before, that we could learn from each other. People, everyone can kind of learn a bit from each other. And, those who are currently banging their heads against a wall, artistically speaking, being like, well, this is what I want to do forever. It's like, well, if you just tried a little bit more of this, you might break through that wall enough to become something.
Exactly.
And I wonder then
you might find that maybe that compromise wasn't as bad as you thought.
Yeah. Maybe that's where things like, because I have no idea, maybe you do know this if you've done research on it, but like, for example, The Offspring, when they had that Pretty Fly for a White Guy song, without that song, they would not have surely taken off the way they did.
Yeah.
So I wonder if someone did go, by the way, guys, if you want, why don't we workshop this idea for a bit? And if you did a song a little bit more in this direction, have the rest of the album be quite punk, fine, but this might give you that in. And they're probably quite grateful for that song.
I don't know, but I doubt it, because they were on Epitaph at the time, and like nobody involved with Epitaph is going to like tell a band to be more commercial. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like that's just not special. And like, I don't think there would ever even be an idea that like back then that you could ever even have commercial success playing punk. Like that wasn't really even possible at that time, And in like fairness, Green Day had come out a little bit before that, I think, but like that wasn't an option to like become successful playing punk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I have a very hard time thinking that Brett Gurewitz was like, "Hey guys, we need a hit."
But in fairness, if they did have that thought, I don't know that the idea would be like that. Pretty Fly would be the song that would come out of like, let's make a commercial thing, because it's a very unusual song.
Yeah. The other thing is, I was thinking of the Keep 'Em Separated song, which was before that. Sorry.
Yes. Self-Esteem?
Because
no, that was on the same album.
Come Out and Play. That's the song that blew him up.
Right.
Which was when they were still independent, blah, blah, blah. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a common misconception, I think, that, I think there's a lot. I'm very interested. So I'm not that interested in music, but I am very interested in understanding human behavior. And there's lots of ways that music and the behavior of fandoms around it can be good examples of like human behavior and just sort of like social psychology and stuff. And so like one of the things, are you familiar with like the Big Five personality trait thing model? Have you ever heard of this?
I've heard so many different versions in the
so there's one called the Big Five, which is generally recognized as like one of the more valid ones that people use. It's actually predictive of a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
So one of them is like it's the acronym is like OCEAN. It's openness to new experiences, extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism are like the big five traits. And I would bet a lot of money that if you were to administer this test to sort of the fans of alternative rock, that I bet they would score very highly on openness to new experiences, probably not very high on extroversion, not very high on agreeableness, not very high on conscientiousness, and probably pretty high on neuroticism. And so where I'm headed with this is like the idea that there's this sort of like smoky backroom cabal of like label bigwigs or marketing people, like, you know, secretly pulling the strings, and they're the reason why that band you like put out a bad album, is like it's a really interesting thing of like there's a like a pathological level, I think, of sort of cynicism and skepticism and mistrust of the world, you know, with a lot of these, like a lot of this fandom. It's like, no, the band made a bad album because they made a bad album. Like, have you ever tried getting a musician to do something they don't want to do? Have you ever tried?
Make a good point.
Do you think there's a world in which you're gonna fucking talk to, you know, Brendan O'Brien and Mike Enziger from, you know, Incubus and be like, hey guys, I want you to write a ska album. You got to do it. And I know their fucking manager. I know him. Like, I know the conversations he has had with them. It's never fucking happened. And if it tried, like,
yeah,
and if he did try, 0 fucking % chance. 0% chance.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, what I'm thinking in my head though is there are some instances where fans would be like, "Oh, that's something, you know, their new label has fucking ruined them." In fact, I did a reaction video today to the latest A Day to Remember song, and one of the comments said, "Fueled by Ramen ruined this band," right? But
do you think Jeremy McKinnon is gonna do something because the fucking guy from Fueled by Ramen? Fuck no, he's not. I don't know Jeremy, but like I know a lot of people around A Day to Remember and stuff. Like, I know, like, I've been to their studio. We shared studio space with them for many, many years. Like, 0 fucking % chance that Fueled by Ramen is telling Jeremy McKinnon what to do with his band.
I think that's entirely likely. But what's interesting is
0%.
I think some fans think, oh, its influence is outside. But then for some reason, some others in certain band situations be like, this band fucked up. Like, they will blame the musicians,
yes.
You know, in that case. I don't know what the reason they choose one or the other is, but it's
very selective.
Yeah. It's probably something to do with their own, how much of their own identity they've wrapped up in that band.
Exactly.
You know, they want to disconnect from that band being at fault.
Perhaps.
Yes. Yeah.
I
because
think
they've got a tattoo on their arm and they're like,
or how much they like the person, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. They couldn't possibly like this terrible decision.
Maybe they did. And if they did, so what? You can still like them.
Yeah.
As a person, you know?
Yep. And equally, like, the thing that a lot of fans...
I know, I'm friends with lots of people who make music that I think is terrible. And lots of people who make music that I like, I would never want to know them on a personal level. Yeah. They're two totally separate things.
Yeah, absolutely. All those universes are possible to understand and exist in. Yeah, it's a funny old world. I wish people would give a little bit more slack to bands to go off in different directions in the future, and who fucking cares? Like, the albums that they wrote already that you love still exist. Like, just go listen to them. You don't have to weigh in on everything if you're not into it. Like, whatever.
I think people should invest a lot less. This is ironic for me to say as a YouTuber, but I think people should invest less time in media consumption and less of their personal energy in media consumption.
Yeah. You've been in the kind of the world of, I guess, as you say, music and marketing and business, you know, design things for a long time. Have you noticed a significant difference in a negative or a positive or a neutral way with the advent of so much of our lives living online and the kind of digital peacocking versus in the venues or rooms version of things?
Well, I don't really go to shows very often, so I would be the wrong person to ask about that. But I mean, I've been online. It's also like I've been online for a really long time, since like 1994. So I never really knew a world other than that. You know, it's changed a lot, obviously, but like I was on Usenet in like, you know, in the mid 90s, which is basically like a prehistoric version of Reddit, and or like forums. I mean, it's always going to be the case. You got to understand that the people who are most active online are not normal people. Like a normal person has never even considered the possibility of replying to a tweet in their entire life. You know,
Yes.
like, why would I do that? I remember I asked one of the sales guys at my old job, who's a really cool guy. I was like, "Hey, George, have you ever left a shitty comment on like a YouTube or anything like that?" And he's like, "What? No." Like, I don't know. Like, no, why would I do that?
Yes.
I've never commented on anything.
Same. I realized when I started my channel, this was 3 years ago, and I started getting comments. I'm like, oh, great, I'm getting some comments. That's nice. I realized I've literally never commented on a video once. So I'm like, I don't actually relate to the people who are commenting on videos. And they're great. And so thus far,
some of them are.
Thus far, I mean, I'm not on I think the larger scale you go, the percentage of difficult folks who will come and cause trouble will increase in numbers with that percentage. So,
but the percentage will also increase as well.
Right.
It's not just, so it's two things. Number one is just the law of large numbers, that if 100,000 people watch your video and 1% of them are unstable people, then that means 1,000 people are unstable. But also, the bigger you get, the percentage of like nasty, unstable people also increases. I don't know why, but it does. I think maybe just because you're like a bigger target or something. But there's a moment. There's a retro gaming YouTuber named Phoenix Resale who who a lot of people hate. Like, he's sort of the me of like of retro video games. He made a video called like, "Why do so many people hate my channel?" where he broke this down, and it's brilliant. It's the best discussion of this I've ever seen. Wow. And he's totally right. One thing that he said there, which I've observed myself, is there's a point in any sort of creator's career, and it's true for like just public figures of any kind, I think, where the opinion flips. Once you get sort of big enough, the default opinion flips from being positive to negative. Like, look at Anthony Fantano, for example. Like, people talk so much shit about him.
Yeah.
Like, and oftentimes based on things he doesn't even actually think or say, right?
And probably you're right. It's based on platform size. And so if he disagrees with your opinion on a particular band, because of the size of the platform, that is a bigger punch.
Yeah. And a lot of times, again, it's not even based on things that people even do or say, because lots of times they're just repeating something that they heard someone else. Or like, for example, you know, Gary Vaynerchuk?
I know that name rings a bell.
Gary V.
Oh, yes. Gary V. Yeah. I know that.
So people, when his name comes up all the time, people always, like, one of the most common sort of criticisms is like, well, I just think it's really fucked up how he, promotes hustle culture, and, he thinks money is more important than anything else, which is literally the exact opposite.
He's never said that, no.
He's never fucking once, like, it is the exact, he always tells people you would probably be a lot happier making $70,000 a year doing something you like than making $200,000 doing something you hate. So why don't you quit your fucking job if you hate it? Like, he says the literal exact opposite of what people accuse him of saying, because people will hear what they want to hear, and it has basically zero relationship with what you actually say.
Yeah. And another one in that world is probably Joe Rogan, where people are like, oh, he's just an asshole with terrible opinions and views. Like, if you actually listen to the podcast, which I have not done in a while, actually, but he basically just asks questions. Like, he's asking questions to learn more and find out more, and from other people who might be experts in certain things.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's kind of a dumb guy. I've listened to his podcast since the very beginning. I remember when I posted on the same message board as him like 20 some years ago. So like, I've been following his career for a very, very, very long time. And he's done a lot for the sport of MMA, which is awesome. Not a very educated guy. So I think he sometimes sort of falls prey to like
foot and mouth.
Yeah. He sort of, I think he's a little bit eager to sort of jump on board with things that sound cool, but aren't.
or convincing in some way, right?
Yeah, exactly. But he's not like, you know, people talk about him like he's some sort of like far right, like bigot or something like that. Like, for example, there was the thing when people, you know, were trying to cancel him for saying the N-word. He never brought this up because it would be pointless. But like, one of his daughters is black. So pretty unlikely that he hates black people.
Yeah. And in your world, in one of the videos that you put out recently about your comments and things, people are just straight up making up absolute like bullshit about you that has no basis on anything. And how do you process that? And do you have any mechanisms that you think you should employ or do employ to minimize the amount that you take in from the commenters? Because going back to our statement earlier, you yourself are not necessarily someone who comments on videos. I'm not either. Like, it's a specific window of your audience that necessarily shouldn't drive what you do or do not do with your videos. And well,
I uninstalled all social media from my phone. I uninstalled the YouTube Studio app. So I stopped posting almost completely on Instagram. I almost completely stopped tweeting. And the only time I look at any kind of comments or social media stuff is from my computer, which, you know, is much less than the time on my phone. The only social media that I look at on my phone is LinkedIn, which is a totally different beast and is not full of awful, toxic people. So, I mean, the people are going to say what they're going to say. I can't control that, but I need to just not let it in my brain because it's going to have a negative effect no matter what.
Fair. I imagine at the point that you're at, and as you were saying, if that percentage of, you know, challenging types just increases, then it's not going to get better no matter the situation.
No, it's not going to get better. And you know, there's the people that like say awful things about me and make things up about me. Is like, those people are annoying, but like, that's actually not the stuff that gets to me the most. What gets to me the most is just people being know-it-alls, just doing the actually kind of thing. Yeah. You know, like, people just, that shit just irritates the fuck out of me. Which I don't know, it shouldn't, you know, but it does. And so I just need to not expose myself to it. That's
tough, because that's a very human response. I feel the same thing when I get.
It's a very male response. Women don't do that shit.
Really?
My mom used to call it male answer syndrome. Like, I remember one time, like, we were like sitting, my stepdad and her and I were like in the kitchen, and there was like a raccoon or something in the yard. And my stepdad's like, "Oh, look, there's a baby raccoon." And she's like, "Oh, wow." And she's like, "Wait a minute. How do you know it's a baby?" And he's like, "Well, She's like, "Well, you don't know anything about raccoons." And he's like, stormed off and got mad. And that was the moment where I sort of realized, like, oh, yeah, that is a very male thing to do. Is like, you can't ever just be like, "I don't know," you know. Or like my cousin, and my stepdad was perhaps an especially bad case of this. So my cousin is a very, 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 very intelligent person with he's a very intelligent guy. My stepdad asked him, like, I don't remember what it was. He was like, "Well, what do you think about such and such?" My cousin was like, "Well, I don't know. I'd have to learn more to have an opinion." He's like, "No, but what do you think?" And he's like, I really don't know that much about it. I'd have to learn more to have an opinion." And my stepdad trying to corner him and like got really mad that he wouldn't have an opinion.
Wow.
And there's a lot of people like that, you know?
I guess. Because my experience increasingly, although this was not the case when I was younger, but I think as I grow older, I give less fucks maybe. But I noticed that in moments where someone says, I don't know, I respect that person 10 times. And if they went like, "Oh yeah, I think it's this, that, and the other," it's like, that's not useful. It's not going to help us move forward in any.
Like, people, if you notice, what makes people more angry than anything else is people who they perceive as being centrists. You have to take a stand. No, I don't.
Yeah. That might be...
I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, that's definitely leaking its way over to the UK, I'm noticing. I mean, we're not.
But if you're a centrist, that means that you're tolerating X, which means Y is going to happen. No, it doesn't mean that.
Yeah, not necessarily.
That's how you're interpreting it.
Yeah, there's a lot more of that kind of grandstanding, but you're sort of peer pressured, forced to try, having to, and
I'm not fucking forced to do anything.
no, for sure. But I'm saying the majority.
I know what you're saying, but
be,
like I fucking refuse to play your dumb fucking game.
And that's a perfectly acceptable answer. But you're right. It boggles people's minds, and you're like, no, I'm not gonna repost that thing. It doesn't mean I don't agree with. I'm just like, I'm just not gonna do that. It's not what I'm interested in.
I have no opinion on this. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not a priority. Next.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to make a priority, cool, but I'm not making your problem into my problem.
Yes. Wise. Difficult, but wise. And hopefully some people can learn that over time, but yeah, it's tricky. Now, I had a question from the viewer that I don't actually understand the context of this, because I think this might be an American-based thing. Okay. Dan Skinny asked, if Rockfeed is the Matt Pinfield of our era, are you comfortable being the Kurt Loder of our era? Do you know either of those
These
names?
are people that were on MTV a long time ago. Oh. I don't really understand. I don't understand what he's getting at there. I know who those people are, but Brian from Rockfeed is a very good friend of mine. I talk to him all the time. So if I'm mentioned in the same sentence as Brian in any way, then I'm honored. I love Brian.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't know if maybe it was something. I remember there was something recently between yourself and Nick Nocturnal that one of you was like the mommy and one was the comparison?
Yeah. Nick's great too. I love him. He's awesome. I think he's fantastic, and I respect the shit out of everything he's accomplished. And I love Nick. He's a great guy.
Yeah, certainly he's managing to make a lot of fun videos relating to metal and alternative music that is getting more people interested in those scenes. And
totally, he's the only person that gets views talking about new music.
Yeah, that is hard.
He's the only one.
Yeah, because I guess he has become to the point where he has the platform where it can work, but also he's built the brand and consistency, so that even in a video you're like, I don't know who this band is, you're like, but it'll probably be entertaining if he's doing something for it. That's pretty key.
I respect the shit out of that. And the fact that he's the only one that's been able to do it tells you a lot about how hard it is.
Yes, it's certainly a rare thing. When it comes to your bits and pieces, obviously you're led by what the audience wants you to make. If we lived in a universe where that wasn't the case, would you have a passion project you'd want to do yourself, or a different video you might want to do every once in a while to fill a different cup in your
about music?
About anything necessarily. What's one of your main passions that are not kind of the millennial new metal era music?
Well, the stuff I talk about on LinkedIn, I would say is, pretty much the stuff I'm actually interested in, which is like, basically I like figuring out how to make products that people will pay for. Like, that's what's fun to me.
It's like solving a puzzle, I suppose.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. And it's fucking hard. Like, go up to people on the street and ask them for literally 10 cents. Most people are going to tell you to fuck off. Right? So like, to even get 10 cents from somebody is hard, let alone a product that people will give you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for. So on LinkedIn, I talk about, basically my emphasis there is on helping entrepreneurs understand how to use YouTube and LinkedIn to grow their business, so that's what I talk about on there. And I like that a lot. I've done it for a long time with lots of different people and stuff. So yeah, that's probably like my main interest. If I was going to make YouTube videos about it, like, I like helping people understand how to make money, but that's just not really what my audience like has a lot of really limiting beliefs. They sort of have an innate mistrust of commerce. So for me to, give them information about how to make money, I think would, that would only make them dislike me.
Okay. Yeah. I could follow that thread.
Right.
Yeah. Now, I was wondering what you thought about the world of, and by the way, you cannot offend me, and that's fine. Not that they would matter either way, but I would see that you do the odd, I think you don't really do it as much anymore, but kind of reaction type thumbnails and things, and you'd send up how ridiculous those things can be.
Yeah.
And I felt like you hit an absolute genius sweet spot where you would pull like a reaction-y face that's clearly way over the top, but it still gets the same like eyeballs. Oh, what's this video? That was a genius little bit. How intentional was that? And how much?
It was exactly. I was like, I don't know. Wouldn't it be funny if I just made the dumbest fucking faces I could? That's it.
There was one. I can't remember. Maybe it was. I can't remember what the actual video was, but literally, you were like taking an eye out and your jaw over here. It's quite exceptional. It might have even been like, you know, what happened to ska or something. I'm like, wow, how does
so that's on my second channel, and I don't make those thumbnails. So I just shot a whole bunch of those like photos like that, and I sent them to my editor, and he just picks one. So
nice.
Credit to him for whatever one he decided to pick for that. Yeah.
Great. Now, you said you don't really listen to a lot of the music that you're covering, but yet within that world, you still seem to have opinions about certain genres or things you think like, I just think this is actually bad or not good. For example, one dear to my heart was ska music. Now, I understand, right? Ska is a really hard thing to defend because it's very, as one of my friends put it, trumpety-strumpety. It's just kind of cringe and whatever, but I love it dearly. But how would you come to a conclusion that, for example, as a genre, is something you're like, I don't think it's very good, versus some other within the same alternative rock universe? How do you assess what you think is?
I don't really have any interest in defending my opinion. If people disagree with me, that's fine.
Oh, that's also all right. That's just it's a jolly.
I just don't want to. No matter what I say, people have their opinion, and like, there's nothing I'm going to say if they're going to be like, oh, he's got a good point. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing I could possibly say that's going to make somebody listen to what I'm saying. So what's the point?
Okay. All right. We can hit the skip
You know what I mean? When people are like, when they have their heels dug in, like, I was surprised. Like, so I have a sort of, I'm joking, but it's actually true, is that I think that, with the behavior of like fandoms is, I think that the less social currency a fandom has in real life, the more intense and aggressive they are online.
Interesting.
And ska fans are basically dorks without a lot of social currency, right? Same with like black metal fans and stuff. And they're super incredibly toxic, both of them. As opposed to like, fans of say like 3 Days Grace or, Skillet. I make fun of them all the time. They think it's funny. They never get mad. Right. So it's like an inferiority complex, I think, is what it comes down to. And when somebody's invested, so like, I think a lot of I'm not saying this is you, but a lot of those people I think probably have like, some unresolved kind of personal development or emotional issues they need to work on, because otherwise there's no way that you would be that upset that I made a joke about Real Big Fish. You know what I mean? If you're mad about that legitimately, like, there's something,
it makes total sense.
You need to work on that. And so if somebody is like basically emotionally dysregulated because I made a joke about Real Big Fish, there's nothing I can do to engage with that person. It's like when do you have kids?
I do. Yeah.
So, how old are they?
The eldest is 5, the youngest is 2.5. So pretty young.
So when they're having a tantrum, you can't reason with them, right?
No,
you have to calm them down, wait until they're when they're emotionally dysregulated, you can't reason with them. You have to calm them down from the tantrum. And then you're like, okay, now we need to put our pajamas on. Okay.
Yes.
Right. And so, yeah,
you're dead right. There's definitely going to be a percentage of any fandom of anything that's particularly diehard that is not going to. And one of the most amazing things about human beings is that apparently, and you see this play out, if someone believes something so strongly, even without evidence necessarily, and you provide counter arguments to that, all it doesn't matter is make them believe it more strongly.
Yes.
As almost like a defense mechanism.
Yeah. So one of my favorite quotes is, for those who believe, no proof is necessary. For those who do not believe, no proof is sufficient.
Right. An absolute.
So the answer is you just tell people what they want to hear and get the money and go home.
And I think you probably are well placed to have that understanding based on the amount of comments and things you will see on the videos of things about Skillet or versus ska and whatever it is.
Like I could not make a video, and I not like I want to, but like I could not make a video saying that Iron Maiden is bad.
Because of the avalanche.
Like, it's just not an option.
Just come your way. Yeah. They
right?
wouldn't.
I mean, it's just not the video people want to see.
Yeah.
And it's not like I could say anything in that video where they'd be like, oh, you got a point.
Well, here's the difference I would think, though, is I think you're probably right for the majority. But I personally, for example, in the world of ska, like I'd be interested to know other people's takes on it, whether I agree with it or not, because I don't think everyone should like, or it doesn't make sense for that. And I'm not personally offended if they don't. It doesn't fucking matter. I'm just curious as to why some do and some don't.
Yeah, once again, it's incredibly difficult for me to even like, I don't care about my opinions, right? Like the way my brain works, maybe this is like an autism thing. I don't know. The only way I know to answer a question like that is to, is because I have to spend like, so there's a thing that autistic people have to do called masking, which is basically like presenting yourself in the way that other people want you to be in order to like get along in the normal world. And maybe it's because I've spent my entire life basically having to do that, of like reading other people's expectations and conforming to them in order to exist. I don't know any other way to operate in the world than that. So if you're asking me like, why don't you like ska? I would say, well, ska has a particular type of energy, which, you know, for the interest of time, I don't want to like describe it too much, but you get it. That's sort of like whatever, this like goofy, you know, sort of theater kid kind of energy. I don't respond to that personally. Other people do. So that's the way I would answer that question, is just to like, to me, excuse me, I keep burping because I'm drinking this vitamin water, but to me, everything is about like, I want to have a mental model of everything. I want to have a mental model that describes everything. And I can put myself in that model, but my own opinion is less interesting to me than understanding what the model is. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. The way I would relate to that in my own world is, so when predominantly my videos are me listening to and reviewing and analyzing music from a multi-musician point of view. And so I get frustrated when I'm unable to articulate why I don't like, for example, a kind of music. And it'll be the same kind of thing. If I'm listening to something that I'm like, this is objectively good for these reasons. The performance is good. The songwriting is actually kind of interesting. The structures are good. I just don't connect with it. You know, it's just this, whatever that sound is. And for some people that'll be ska. For me, it'll be things like Avenged Sevenfold or Bullet for My Valentine. Like, there's something about that doesn't connect. I can't put it into words, and that's frustrating because I want to be able to clarify with words, and sometimes you can't. That's part of the experience somehow.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's there's a couple things there. Number one is like, I would call that basically that goes under the umbrella to me of like philosophy of art, which I think is a very interesting subject. So like, I went to school for graphic design for 3 years, and then I switched out and got a degree in design and marketing, management and marketing. But I had to take a shitload of art history as part of the design program. And that was actually fascinating for that exact reason. I thought it was going to be really boring. I thought I was going to like, oh my God, I have to take fucking 6 quarters of art history. Ended up being like absolutely fascinating and really helped me just not like completely unrelated to my design career, just to like understand how to describe the intent of anything, and to describe, you know, why I react to it in a certain way. And to get down to things like, for example, I personally I respond to like impressionist and expressionist and futurist painting, because they're sort of, if you were to think of it on a spectrum, before that, you know, most things were like representative, you know, like the old masters and all that kind of shit. That's not interesting to me because it just basically replicates life, which is not interesting because I have eyes and I can just see it myself.
Right.
On the other hand, there's stuff like, you know, say like Mark Rothko or something like that, who would, you know, like he would like literally just paint like a pink square. And I understand why that's interesting on a conceptual level, you know, because it's sort of like challenging all these conceptions about art of like that you're supposed to be representational. But on a formal level, meaning, you know, just the way it looks, it's not interesting to me because it's just a fucking pink square. I get it. I respect it, but that's not visually interesting to me. But in somewhere on the middle there, I think is things like Impressionism, Expressionism, Futurism, Cubism, where it's sort of reality with a twist. Right. So it's like that twist is what's interesting to me. the place at which it diverges from reality a bit, but it doesn't completely diverge from reality. So that's what I respond to, because in that twist where it diverges from reality is where you see the artist's point of view. For example, like, do you know that painting Nude Descending a Staircase by any chance?
I don't. I'd have to Google that one.
It's like a pretty famous one. I think it's by Brock. It's like a futurist painting, I think. So look it up there. You can see it's probably, I think it's from like 1905 or 1910 or something.
Right.
It's fucking amazing how they depict the passage of time in that. Like basically you're seeing motion blur.
Yes, 100%.
It's fucking brilliant. And motion blur didn't exist then, because like we didn't have like movie cameras and stuff. And so
it's
like
a bunch of straight lines for what would be a human form. It's kind of but you could see, because of that, the way it would flow.
Do you see like the motion blur thing?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's fucking amazing. Like to me, like
you can see like a full second of time within. Exactly.
They're representing like, you know, they've added basically a fourth dimension here, which is time, to a two-dimensional medium. Or you could think, you know, they're simulating 3 dimensions with the shading and stuff, and then they've added the fourth dimension of time through, you know, basically the essentially motion blur. So a shit like that to me is like fascinating and super interesting. But just saying like I don't like that is like, that's to me like the most basic. There's nothing interesting there to me of like, just be like, this sucks.
Nope, that makes total sense. Totally. Yeah, and what you said about that,
stimulating discussion to me.
Yeah. And I think you've painted that picture really well. Pun definitely not intended. But within that analogy, because the same thing can apply in probably more than, I always think in music terms, but in more parts of the world in life. Like there'll be, you know, jazz, you can see it's impressive contextually, whatever it's doing, but maybe, you know, for me, it's just you're being, you know, wankery on a music instrument just to be show-offy. But then for others, that is what they connect to as a particular form.
Yeah, and, you know, if that's what you connect to, fine. You know, I would perhaps challenge I would challenge you to perhaps broaden your perspective a little bit, but ultimately that's your prerogative as the consumer, is like you like what you like. But yeah, in that regard, this is true of like all art in general. You could, you know, I don't know if you've seen some of my older videos where I used to do a lot of the 2x2 matrix kind of things, but I think you could look at it. Any piece of art to me can be looked at as on a conceptual dimension. So whether it's interesting conceptually or not on one dimension, and the other dimension, whether it's interesting formally or not, meaning, do I like the way, or is it interesting purely for like the way it looks or sounds or whatever, is the formal dimension, and the conceptual dimension is like, what are they trying to say? And there are pieces of art that fit into all 4 of those categories. And of course, the ones that are most interesting are the ones that are interesting both formally and conceptually, but they could be both. For example, like Mark Rothko, I think, is an example of something that's not very interesting formally, but is interesting conceptually. Or, you know, probably some people might say that about like the new Avenged Sevenfold album, you know, that it's interesting formally and conceptually. But that's one of the reasons like a lot of rock music is not very interesting to me, is because it's neither one of those things to me. Sure. Right. It's like, it's just kind of doing something that's been done many times before formally, meaning it sounds like a lot of shit we've heard before. And none of the ideas are anything new to me. And so I like to always get down to first principles thinking. And so what I've realized is that I value newness. Like that's something that's appealing to me. And I'm not saying everybody should, but like, if there's not something new here, like I value innovation. And if there's not something here that's innovative, I'm probably not gonna, I'm not the person to appreciate it. And so, yeah, with a lot of rock music, I would put it in that corner of like not really innovative formally or conceptually. And even stuff that's only innovative formally but not conceptually is sort of increasingly not very interesting to me, because, you know, then it's basically just AI. It's just like, you know, you're just throwing a bunch of shit in there and remixing it. And yeah, it looks or sounds different, but why? Right. And so to me, that's the part that's interesting. I've noticed most rock fans don't care about lyrics or vocals, I think, because most rock fans now are guitarists. So really, they just totally hyper focus on the guitars. That's really the riffs is like the only thing they care about. And again, you know, whatever, the way that
Yeah.
whatever you value in music is your choice. But to me, that seems like a very limiting, like, for example, I don't want anybody to like get upset about this, but I watched a Rick Beato video recently where he was doing one of his like Spotify top 10 songs breakdowns thing. And he played a new Taylor Swift song and he muted the vocals.
Okay. But that's,
and I was like,
pretty intricate.
And it was just talking about the chord progression. I'm like, it's pop. Literally the entire point of this is the vocals.
Yeah.
To like mute the vocals, that's like listening to Dream Theater and muting the guitars.
Yeah, that's not the. That's a. I don't think the song was maybe designed to be.
Exactly. Or like watching. This is like watching a Hollywood blockbuster movie in black and white. Yeah, you know, like on a black and white TV, and it'd be like, I don't know, it's not that. Right, it looks kind of washed out, and we're like, well, yeah, you're watching on a fucking black and white TV. And, you know, we can all interpret art however we want. There's no objectively right or wrong way to consume it. But I do think that that you should always be open to the idea that the way you're interpreting it, that you may be missing something. And I always want to be able, there's lots of things that, you know, I've changed the way that I view things because I understand it now differently, for whatever reason. But I think a lot of rock fans, I don't actually think they're fans of music. I think they're fans of rock music. When I don't think they're fans of art, I think they're just fans of rock music. You know what I mean?
I can see that, and I can see how that would play out. And yeah, perhaps that is a majorative way of thinking.
Yeah, and again, nothing wrong with that. But it's not me.
Like it's, you know, there's some very generic music out there, and if that's what you're into, great. Like, fine, enjoy yourself. There's some incredibly complex, mad time signature prog stuff out there, and that's what you're into. Great, enjoy it.
Totally.
Ignore the stuff you don't want to listen to, and just let people kind of get on with it. But I've found your insights, your way of thinking, and what you said here, utterly fascinating. So thank you again very much for your time. There's so much you said, especially at the end about the ways of looking at art in particular, that I'm going to probably lose sleep over this night when I'm applying that to different things in music and how I see it and how I evaluate it and the rest. So I'm delighted for those little nuggets of wisdom for yourself. So thank you so much.
I'll tell you a book. I don't know if this will make sense to you or not, but it may not, but there's a book you should read by a guy named Jan Tschichold. It's from like 1905, called The New Typography. And where he's describing, this is basically the genesis of like modern graphic design. Mm-hmm. I'm not even sure if it's still in print, but you can like see some pages from it online somewhere, I'm sure. And he's describing like a totally new paradigm for design that will seem to you to be so totally like expected and mundane. For example, because he completely redefined the way that we think about graphic design. So like, if you think about graphic design now, it's a headline with, you know, a bunch of text that's, you know, left justified and blah, blah, blah. And like the way you think of a page layout now is not the way they thought about it before that. Like before that, like, for example, he presents in the beginning of it, there was no relationship between the visual aesthetic of design and the actual content before that. So like the first thing he presents in the book is it's this piece of paper with a bunch of like flowers and shit on it and some like kind of ornate typography and stuff. It looks really pretty. And he says like, what do you think this is? Because it's not in English, it's in like German or something. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's an invitation to a funeral. And so his point is like, isn't it crazy that we just like put all this like decoration that makes no sense onto this, you know, this funeral. And so we've created this piece of visual communication or this piece of design that is incredibly poor visual communication, because until then nobody had the thought of, oh, maybe the visual style should have some relationship to the content.
Yeah.
Right. So my point here is that understanding, like, if you want to be a fan of anything and if you want to have strong opinions about it, you should challenge yourself to get down to like very first principles thinking of all, like you said, the reason why you're frustrated that you can't articulate why you do or don't like something, because you can't get down to the first. And there's some examples of that too. For me, like, I've never really been able to articulate why I don't like indie music, and it drives me nuts.
Mm.
There's just some sort of like,
I wondered in myself whether it's like I don't want to identify myself with a group that listens to that because I don't relate to them. Like, does it go even subconsciously in that direction?
Totally. That's totally possible. Like, there's just some sort of like, I'll just call it like beta cuck energy with like indie music that just fucking annoys me. It just fucking irritates me. But that's not good enough.
Yeah.
Like, I need to be able to articulate it better than that.
It's tough. Yeah.
It's not there yet. And I've been trying to think about it for years. So my point is, like, with this book, like, he completely fucking reinvented graphic design and so then the guys from like Bauhaus and like all these other, you know, the international style, like all these other people that you think of as like, you know, the Swiss and German guys that sort of we think of as the founding fathers of graphic design now, were all basically like sort of picking up where he left off. And so the point I want to make is that, like, if you're the type of person that has like strong feelings about music, or anything else, like, keep asking yourself why until you get down to the very first principles, which ultimately is going to be subjective. You're going to say, I value the following, which that's the thing that, like, that at that point, nobody can like challenge that, or you can still keep challenging it. But like, sure. For example, like I said, I value newness, and people should still say, why do you value that? But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, well, this is just what I value. Yeah.
You might get to what you would accept as the end of that why trail.
Yeah.
For yourself to go, that's my core fundamental.
Yes. But that's where you have to get to, is like first principles. And if you get down to that, the great part is that you might actually find yourself being a little bit uncomfortable with what you find there at the bottom of that pit, right? And be like, oh, really? That's my thing?
Oh, no, I hate that about myself.
Right. That doesn't sound great. I should probably rethink that, which is great, because then, and my point here is not that I want to like invalidate anybody's opinions or anything like that. Like, in fact, it's the opposite. Like, what hopefully happens is that you realize that actually now you understand, you appreciate something in a whole new way.
Yeah. You know, like, yourself better, which should be a worthy endeavor.
Exactly. You've changed your point of view on the world, and you like, you know, you think about, you just got a new pair of glasses that now like are better, and you're like, oh, I see things more clearly now.
Well, it sounds difficult. It sounds scary, but I want that new pair of glasses. So I'm definitely going to spend some time applying those thinking to my own world. Thank you again very much indeed. I don't want to take up any more of your time, but again, you've actually blown my mind with some of the things that we've been talking about today. So I really appreciate all of that, and good luck with your channels and what you're going to do in future. I urge you to keep going and doing what you're doing, because I think it's worthy and interesting, and I really appreciate it. So thanks. Well, I found that to be an entirely thought-provoking and fascinating conversation with Finn McKenty there. If you'd like to see more of his content on YouTube, I'll add some links in the description for you to follow. If you enjoyed this, then feel free to subscribe to the channel. You'll see hopefully more of these kind of interviews in future as well. There's also a free Discord server in the description you can join and chat to me about music, the same way I'm talking to guests on this podcast. Thank you for watching or listening on whatever platform you've enjoyed this on. Hopefully I'll see you in another episode very soon.